This is it, the final stretch of the Chasm's Call challenge. Hey, I'm Salzner, and let me tell you, it was something. Just when I thought I was wrapping things up, someone pointed out that I was actually doing the challenge wrong. So I had to scramble to fix as much as I could, without completely derailing my original vision. At this point, I was honestly just relieved to hit submit. I like what I created, and if I end up getting disqualified because I overlooked some rules, that's okay with me. I've learned a lot for the next time. But before we get to the final render, let me walk you through all the last minute problem solving, the ocean simulation, the creature rigging, and, of course, the chaotic desperation that comes with finishing a big project under a deadline. So, there were 3 big content rules to this challenge. The foreground shelf, which I had, but a character had to be placed on that shelf, which I initially didn't do. And creating a sense of depth, which, I don't think I pulled that off. I had already talked about the foreground shelf in the last part, but I didn't realize the character had to be on it. Originally, they were on the lighthouse, so I had to shift the composition and rework the animation a little. The biggest issue though was the sense of depth rule. My original plan had the steep underwater canyon where the creature would emerge, but visually it just wasn't working. My brain couldn't wrap around a way to make it look right, so I adjusted the setting. Now, the scene takes place on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Technically, there's still a deep sinkhole under the water, but you can't see it because of the stormy waves. So probably not the best execution of depth. But I liked the final shot enough to submit it anyway. Back to my process though. In my last video, I totally forgot to talk about how I made the ocean. Blender actually has an ocean modifier that makes things super easy. You can tweak the settings to create the right wave size and intensity, so I pushed it toward a rough, stormy sea fitting the mood. Since I was already in Blender, I also animated a boat. I grabbed the model from Sketchfab and used a simple technique to make it react to the water. First, I created a high-res grid and added a shrink wrap modifier so it conformed to the ocean's surface. Then I added a copy location and copy rotation constraint to the boat, targeting the grid. This made the boat follow the waves naturally. I then baked the animations of both with the visual keying setting turned on and exported them to use them in Unreal. For the creature itself, I pulled inspiration from deep-sea monsters, especially designs from Subnautica. I knew I wanted something huge with a gaping mouth big enough to swallow the boat whole. I went with a mix of eel-like and ray-like features to give it a sleek but menacing look. I modeled it using the subdivision technique, starting with a simple cube, hitting Ctrl+3 subdividing it, shaping it through extrusions and vertex adjustments. Then I finally had an excuse to dust off my graphic tablet for sculpting. It is possible with a mouse, but let's be honest, it is much more comfortable with a pen. I smoothed out the forms, refined the mouth details, and added sharp ridges along the head and spine. I did some retopology to make the mesh low poly again, for easier use in animation later, and then completely forgot to bake my high-resolution sculpt details onto the low poly model. But funny enough, it didn't matter, because in the final shot, you can't even see them. Are we noticing a pattern here? I rigged the creature directly in Unreal, since I had done something similar before. Weight painting was a challenge. I had to retouch it multiple times because some bones were moving parts of the mesh they weren't even close to, but eventually I got it working. For animation, I used Unreal's modular control rig. Instead of hand animating every little movement, I relied on chain modules for the body and fins. For that, I turned on dynamic movement, which gave it this wobbly, jiggly motion that was honestly way too much fun to mess around with. Wobble wobble. Sorry. For the material, I kept the creature black to keep it hidden in the dark ocean. But I wanted to add an eerie, otherworldly touch, so right before it attacks, its insides glow, as if it's cooking its prey before swallowing it. Creature animation though, brutal. Huge respect to animators who specialize in this, because it is not easy. At first, my creature moved way too fast. My partner pointed out that for something this massive, it should be slower and feel heavier. That led me to look up whale movements, how they breach the water, twist, and then land on their backs. Once I kind of mimicked that, the animation felt a lot more believable. I turned the animation I had in the sequencer into an animation asset and exported it. To make the ocean react when the creature emerged, I used Dynamic Paint back in Blender. I imported the animated creature and set it as a brush and the ocean as a canvas, so it would generate ripples when the creature surfaced and crash back down. At this point, the deadline was creeping up, and I was scrambling to add final VFX. I used LiquiGen by Jenga FX, which was generously provided to challenge participants. I had never used it before, but since I was familiar with their GeoGen tool, I picked it up quickly. I got the liquid splash working and exported it as a mesh. But the foam and spray? Disaster. The simulation exported as a point cloud, and no matter what I tried, direct imports into Unreal, Blender's geometry nodes, I could not get it working in Unreal. After multiple failed attempts and hours of waiting for exports that ended up with empty files, I just gave up and faked the foam using a Fresnel effect. For the final look, I played with the rain particle settings and post-processing. I originally used an LOT inside Unreal, but it looked weird in the rendering, so I scrapped it and did the color grading entirely in DaVinci Resolve instead. I also applied a Kuwahara filter for a painterly effect, though I'm not so sure anymore if it was the right call for such a dark scene. At this point I was exhausted. I hit submit, called it done, and honestly, I was just ready to work on something else again. These challenges are great for pushing creativity and learning new things, but they also remind me a lot of university, in not a good way. That's why I'm excited to jump back into something that's 100% my own. No deadlines, no restrictions, just experimenting and doing things because I feel like it. Speaking of which, I'll be continuing on the story I started a month ago before the challenge. If you want to see what I'll be working on next, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my upcoming projects. And if you liked this breakdown, let me know in the comments. Also, was there anything you want to hear or see in more detail? Oh, and if you want to support my work, check out my Patreon website or social links in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.